time is 9:00 a.m. and we are meeting via Zoom due to the current pandemic and the stay-at-home orders in place in the state of California. Today we have one matter on the calendar, and it is on the consent calendar. And that matter is the Orange County Sanitation District, case number 2048-15, and they are requesting a short variance today. Now, before we begin, I understand that Dr. Bernstein believes he has at least the appearance of a conflict of interest and will be recusing himself. So, Dr. Bernstein, if you could say a few words about that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I currently sit on the Orange County Sanitation District Board as a board member, and therefore I am recusing myself from this particular case due to the potential conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bernstein. And Dr. Bernstein will be present, but Dr. Bernstein is like any other member of the public. He will not be deliberating nor voting in the final vote. Okay, we have a number of documents, board members, that we will begin by marking. Do we lose? Oh, I see. Okay, sorry. I didn't see you for a second there, Mohan. Okay, so we're going to begin by marking the two documents that were attached to the petition. We received as attachment number 1 the permit at issue, and we're going to mark that as exhibit number 1 for petitioner. In addition, there was an NOV from 2018 from a Blue Sky audit, I assume, and it is a 2-page NOV. We're going to mark that as exhibit number 2. In addition, we received several consent calendar documents, and I'm going to start with marking the stipulation to place the matter on consent as exhibit number 3. I'm going to go through that. The parties are agreeing to place the matter on the hearing board's consent calendar for today. In addition, there are 3 declarations, which we'll mark right now. The declaration of Terry Ann will be marked as exhibit number 4. The declaration of David Rodriguez will be marked as exhibit number 5. And the declaration of Riaz Moinuddin will be marked as exhibit number 6. And the parties have agreed that all 3 of those declarations will be placed in evidence. So 4, 5, and 6 are in evidence. Parties have also agreed to propose findings and decision, which we all received and will be marked now as exhibit number 7. The district does not oppose the granting of this petition based on all the evidence that have been just marked. In addition, it is not expected that this variance, if granted, would result in a violation of Health and Safety Code Section 41-700 for nuisance. And again, and also the parties do stipulate to the conditions that are set forth in the finding and decisions. Okay, and with all that, I'm going to, before we just.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator.
The finding conditions, unfortunately, was posted 3 or 4 times for reading, and there's no essential changes.
There were several changes, and because it was so confusing, I agree, Senator. Because it was so confusing, one of the last changes was I had requested that the start date be placed in. There was no start date. In addition, I requested a clarification as to the end date, because there were 2 places where the end date had been placed, once in a condition and once at the beginning, and they were somewhat in conflict with each other just because it wasn't very clear which prevailed. So there were some other changes, I believe, that Mr. Balagopalan had requested to be clarified. And because they did it so many different times, I requested that they send all of the final documents all at once. And so we received that, but those were the major changes. Mr. Balagopalan, was there any other major changes that you had requested that you wanted to point out as well?
In the findings, I think there was a condition number 9 that subsequently has been removed in the final one.
That is correct. That was condition number 9 was the condition that had also attempted to state an end date and stated that it would end upon notification, but it wasn't clear what the notification was or to whom, and it conflicted with no later than February 6th. So that was just removed, and that whole end date was moved to the beginning of the order.
All these changes were done in a short period of time, but I printed each of them, which is unnecessary, not knowing that changes are being made to the findings and decisions. I mean, it's not very good.
Yeah, I'm going to read.
Not your fault, but I'm sorry.
I'm going to read. I agree, and I'm going to read. Let me find it. Hold on one second.
Read which one?
No. What I was going to read is I wrote to the parties. Let me just find it because I think this is a really good point for the future. Oops. Oh gosh. Sorry. This is a really good point for the future, which is that parties, it's not, let me read what I wrote, because it is not the role of the hearing board to go through consent calendar items for mistakes. Hold on one second. You know what, I can't find it. But I wrote to the parties and I told them, because it was concerning to me that this does happen often, Senator, and I agree with you, that especially now that we're working remotely, many parties are wanting to go on to consent if possible. And in this case, there was a lot of documents and they're very thorough and that's great. But because there's a sort of a rush to get them out because they were trying to be so thorough, what happens is there are mistakes that are made. And as a result, there are always many different iterations and drafts and amended papers. And it's very hard for the hearing board, as you're saying, Senator, to keep track of which is the one we're supposed to be deliberating on, what's the latest papers on which we're supposed to be relying. And so I think moving forward, I'm going to be a lot more stringent that if there are major issues in papers and it's within the amount of time that we have to have had those consent documents, I don't think it can be on consent. And my point had been to the parties that it is not our role on consent is to review the papers and make sure that we believe that there is enough evidence in the declarations to support the proposed findings and decision. It is not up to the board to go through the papers with a fine-tooth comb, find all of the mistakes and make sure we catch them before we end up on consent with papers that are faulty, or we don't even know which are the papers. So it's my apologies that this happened on this particular set of papers. It was my hope that by requesting that by the end of the day on Friday, which they did, that they sent a complete set of papers, that this wouldn't be confusing, but apparently that did not help. So I think in the future, we're going to have to be a lot more stringent on making sure that papers are in and correct.
Which one are we using today?
So we are using, Madam Clerk, do you have a time? I'm going to look too on when those last documents were sent. Let me see. I'm just searching my inbox.
They're essentially the same, except minor changes. So let's begin.
Okay, and oh, here it is. Okay, so it was last sent, just so we be clear. Just so we're all on the same page, just I have my computer's a little slow while we're Zooming, but okay, here it is. Here it is, okay. Just give me one moment. I don't see the, it's hard to tell.
It's sent at 4:22 p.m., Julie,
22, thank you so much.
yeah, from the
Mr.
clerk of the board. And,
Okay, so from the clerk, 422, those are the ones we're looking at, that whole set of papers. And again, the major change was simply to clarify the term of the proposed short variance, which would begin December 6th, when they'll be out of compliance, which we'll go over once we start deliberating, and will end either upon notification of the source test or February 6th, whichever is later. So of 2021, I hope that is clear, not 2020. Okay, so with that, before we enter deliberation, board members, I would like to see if there's any member of the public who is present who wishes to speak. And I'm not seeing anyone that I don't recognize, but if there's anybody who wishes to speak, please indicate either with the raise hand feature or by turning on your camera or by otherwise indicating verbally that you wish to be heard. Any members of the public? Okay, I see none. Board members, anyone wish to begin deliberation in this matter? Otherwise, I'm happy to.
I can-
Mr. Balagopalan, you want to begin?
Yeah, I think as you indicated and pointed out, the declaration by Ms. Terrian, Mr. David Rodriguez, and Reyes Monedin were very detailed. And I think it was very succinct, all the sequence of events that occurred and the reason why they're requesting this variance. It's basically, the nutshell is because they're not sure they can meet the testing date of December 6th for doing the ammonia slip testing. From the declaration they submitted, they knew the project was going to take long, at least 5 months, and they started early part of January, and then but things happen like well-played plans of mice and men go awry, but it seems like that's what occurred. They had the vendor they found for that engine was in Pennsylvania, so they had to strip the whole engine, which took about 8 weeks, I think, to disassemble the engine, ship everything over to Pennsylvania, and then as from the declaration, as they were stripped, they disassembled the parts, and then they were getting the parts back. The ones that are disabled, the last comes back later, and then then COVID hit, and then the delivery issues and so forth, and then on top of that, then again the well-played plan. I think the crankshaft, they drilled the wrong holes for putting the I think it's the what do you call that? The weights basically, on the crankshaft, so it was in the wrong place. So they have to again, and that was assembled last because that was removed to last, and so it gets anyway. They have to ship that back, and then to make that matter even worse, after they assemble everything, there was a crankcase fire, and there was an explosion, and they have to then again strip, and ship it back again to get it repaired. So all of that has delayed significantly from what was a 5-month projected timeline to a much longer period. But it looks like they're still on track. And according to the petition, today they're doing the 24-hour test. And if that goes through, and with every 15 minutes they check and see, what's wrong. If not, they have to reset it. And then if that goes through, then they'll do the 96-hour test. And once this is done, if everything goes as accordingly, but I don't think even Mr. Rodriguez or Mr. Moinudin expected some issues, so they may get delayed, and they might not meet the testing deadline of the December 5th, which Ms. Terrian's statement said they actually realized that because of this project, they have to push it back. So they did the test earlier so that the 1 year will be much later, be in the December timeframe. But even with all that planning, still things sort of went, beyond their control. It went awry, basically. But the good news is it looks like they are finally on track. They are running the engine hopefully today and tomorrow, and hopefully they don't have any major complications and they can conduct the tests when they can. But if not, the variants will give them some time to conduct the test by February 6th.
Right, I agree with everything you said. And just taking us back, this is not a case where there's excess emissions or something's not working correctly. This is just merely a request to push back if necessary, because as you're saying, Mr. Balagopalan, it's possible that they'll meet the December 5th deadline. However, it's just merely a testing because they needed to overhaul this particular engine. So it's a testing for ammonia slip, and that's all they're requesting, is to move that date back. And as you were saying, I think this planning, I think it's also important to take that, however mile high look at this case and see that they've really been planning for this way in advance. And this should never have been pushed back if not for COVID. So rather than June of last year, they tested in, June of this year, they tested early in December of last year to give themselves that entire year, even though it was only supposed to be a 5-month job. They bid this contract out. So they did their job as a public agency. They moved it along as quickly as possible, starting January of this year, right away. And then again, COVID hit. And from what I saw in the papers, they had to disassemble this entire engine, and it has hundreds of parts, and all those parts had to be individually inspected and repaired and shipped back. And every one of those shipping dates got moved and expanded because of COVID. And then, of course, there were those errors that were done on the part of the manufacturer, not Orange County Sanitation District's issues. And let's also take that 10-mile view, high view, and see that this is an essential public service, wastewater treatment plant. There's redundancy built in, and so they're completely in compliance with all rules and regulations. It's just a matter of pushing that testing deadline back. And as you pointed out, I think there's, Mr. Balagopalan, I think there's ample evidence to show it was beyond their reasonable control, and they did everything they could to get this, what was essentially supposed to be a 5-month project, done so that they could do the testing in time for the December 5th deadline. And there are no excess emissions. So I can certainly make all the findings as they're laid out in Exhibit 7. Mr. Balagopalan.
Yeah, if I may just add, I think this is one of 3 engines. So while they have the other 2 running, but that could go down any time. So they do need to get this engine tested and running and as available as needed if the other ones or 2, whatever, and if something happens to the other 2. And I think they're planning to do the repairs on each of the engines sequentially. And it's a tremendous cost, and it's a huge engine. It's a V12. It's a 3,400 horsepower. So the magnitude of the engine is large, and the bores are large, and the pistons are huge, and the piston ring. I'm sure it's a huge undertaking. As they indicated, they need to have cranes and all to remove all that. And and the fact it took 8 weeks for disassembly, it gives a magnitude of the size of the engine and all the pieces that they had to disassemble, tag it, as you mentioned, and ship it.
And they've been very diligent in coming to us. They don't know if they're going to miss the deadline. It's likely, given all the problems they have had up to now, that they might miss the deadline. And we're not hearing this as an interim or an emergency. We're hearing this as a notice short variance. So they thought about it in advance. They not only planned for this whole project to be done and the testing to be done in time, but they also planned to come before us with plenty of time for appropriate notice. Any other thoughts? Ms. Verdugo-Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree that we can substantiate the findings, and the fact that they went to all of this trouble to disassemble. an engine of that size and send them over there, get them corrected and sent back. And the fact that I'm always concerned about ammonia slippage, especially when it comes to the possible effects that it can have on the surrounding neighborhood or any other sensitive receptors. The fact that they've gone to this length, I think also is commendable, and that finally, you know, I really can find substantiation for the findings.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Senator?
They put forth a good argument as to why the variance should be granted. Failure, the troubleshooting, the distance between the plant operation and where the repairs are done back in Pennsylvania. That's all very good. In fact, they don't slip that much time. From December 6th, we was expected to complete the testing. Now it's February 8, 2021. And in spite of all the problems incurred during the process of making these repairs, that's not much additional time to request. However, they're not that good. They're not good neighbors. Because there was notice of violation. If you watch the notices, the violation, they were noted in 2018 for engines 1, engines 2 and 3. Did you read those things? Failure to conduct source testing back in 2018. Well, according to permit to bill, those times were specified. And the fact that they never met any of these conditions, they were cited. So they're not doing this out of good faith of the heart. They're doing it because they're required to do it. They're doing one engine at a time, fine, but they still have engine 2 and 3 got problems. And they were so cited. It was, the notice of violation was written explaining those problems. I just want to put that on the table.
And thank you. And that was addressed. I'm trying to, does anyone recall off the top of your head who addressed that? One of the 3 declarations does
Ms.
address.
Terry Ann, I believe, Julie, whose address was by Terry Ann's declaration.
That's right. And she mentions that there were reasons, that testing was done a little bit late, and I can't recall. Do you recall, Mr. Balagopalan, where that is and what it says?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. And recall that these major audits of Title V facilities often result in NOVs, and they are because of the magnitude.
It's on page 6 of her testimony, declaration.
Because I didn't underline it. Oh, here we go. NOV reference in the petition. That's right. So if you want to turn to exhibit number 4, the declaration of Terry Ann, she talks about the NOV, and she says, I'm trying to remember exactly what she said. I think they had difficulty with their testing vendors, and as a result of the disappointing experience with those vendors, it's on page 6 of Terry Ann's declaration, which is exhibit number 4. There's a whole section on the NOV referenced in the petition. And again, they have successfully tested.
What line is that? I'm sorry.
Since then. What line is that? Well, the entire page deals with the NOV. paragraph number 21.
Okay, I see.
That's correct.
Well,
So-
there's just not this engine. This is engine number 1. The violation addresses engine number 2 and 3 as well.
Well, they addressed engine number 1 because our requirement in the petition is that if you have any NOVs, and I think actually this is further back than they would have to do, but if you have any NOVs that relate to the variance request, that they have to attach it. And so that's why they explained that particular violation as to number.
The point I'm raising, they're not just having a problem with engine number 1, they're having a problem with 2 and 3, and they're supposed to be operating continuously with a backup. I mean, where does that leave us?
That's not what the NOV was about. The NOV was not about a problem with the engine per se. It was a problem with the testing deadline. They have since tested the engines, and all 3 of the engines, including the engine that has now been taken apart for the overhaul and for which they're requesting the variance relief for the testing date. They've all been tested since that NOV was written, and they've all passed the test. So we're not excusing any non-compliance with ammonia slip or any other emissions limit. Rather, we're simply focusing, and the NOV is relevant to the point that they have in the past slipped their date, but they have explained why they slipped that date, and that they have since tested, and that to correct that issue, they have contracted with different contractors to try to ensure that the date doesn't slip again in the future and now in the past, because they use those different contractors for the December 2019 testing. And so while relevant to some extent, you don't have to worry that because of this NOV, there's some faulty engines that are otherwise operating. They are, to our knowledge, in compliance with other rules and regulations. This is just explaining a slipped test date from 2018. But the tests have since been done.
All right, carry on.
Good points to raise and to make sure we have on the record. Are there any other thoughts before a motion is made? Okay. Mr. Balagopalan, do you wish to make a motion? I can, otherwise I can make a motion.
Sure. Yeah, I can make the motion.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Oh, yeah.
The date to be completed is in February, is that correct?
The date,
Based on this variance.
the ending date may not be February. The ending date, I'm going to read it just so that we're really clear on what motion we're making and what vote we would be taking. So I'm going to read the whole term, which is found on page 6 going to page 7 of Exhibit 7, which is the proposed order. And it would say petitioner is granted a short variance, and it says the rules, which is just a condition number requiring that ammonia slip testing starting on December 6th, and it starts December 6th because the deadline for testing is December 5th. Now, if they meet the December 5th testing, then this variance would not take effect. Starting on December 6th, 2020, and ending upon completion of ammonia source testing and the notice to Christina Gonzalez and Paul Tran of the completion of the source testing as required in condition 5 below, but in no event later than February 6, 2021. So it's going to begin, if they haven't completed the testing, on December 6th, and it will end upon testing, but in no event later than February 6th.
And no event beyond February 6th?
Sorry?
You saying no event, no in terms of delay, shall not be beyond February 6th?
That's correct. This variance would end.
Sooner, but later, not later than.
Sorry,
It
it says, but in no event later than.
well, no later than February 6th.
That's right. It says it will end no later than February
I
6th.
understand what it says.
Okay.
The question is, what if they don't make the February 6th deadline? This is a very sensitive piece of equipment.
If they don't make the February 6th deadline, they no longer have variance coverage.
No longer what?
They no longer have variance coverage.
Well, can they petition for additional time?
I believe they could, but only up until the 90 days for a short variance. This is less than 90 days.
I know, so the limit then is up to 90 days.
That's correct. So
Mhm.
they could do that, or they could request a regular variance. But it seems to me, given all the papers and the evidence, that they will be in compliance by then. And that's why they chose that date. But if they slip and they know they're going to slip, they'll have to petition for a regular variance or simply an extension, but it can only go to 90 days from December 6th.
Well, this is a fine-tune a very sensitive piece of equipment. So they're suggesting in the petition that things it happens. So if they don't meet that deadline, then of course we can anticipate them coming back based on the open-endedness. Is open-ended.
I don't believe it's open-ended. My thought always when it comes to variances is you don't want to give too long of a time. And of course, you don't want to give too short of a time. But we certainly don't want to be granting variances that go too long when all the evidence points to a completion date that's much sooner. So it's really the unforeseen thing that could happen, event that might happen that could push it back. But at this point, it's unforeseen because it's more likely than not that they will be done by February 6th, given the evidence and where they are now. And Mr. Balagopalan, you mentioned that by saying that they've already started that 24-hour, they're doing that today. That
Yeah, according to their
according to the declaration.
yes, declaration. Yeah.
So they're already well on their way. So we'll see what happens. They'll know what's going to happen next. Probably 20.
They're expecting, I think they said in their declaration, they think they'll run into some problems, but I think they built enough time to correct it, hopefully, and do the testing.
That's correct. And this is different, just to point out that this is different than when we're given for example, if a facility is under an order for abatement or something, or a variance, and they continue to have a piece of equipment that is out of compliance and they're omitting, and they give us a date and it gets pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. This is a piece of equipment that is not being operated, other than to put it back into operation, but it's not being operated. And the sole request for this variance is a pushback in the date of testing. That's it. Not to continue to violate any kind of emissions limitation or anything of that matter. So I think this, given the thoroughness of these papers and the thoughtfulness that is clearly expressed in all of the planning and all of the, including the planning to come before this board and ask for a variance and next steps and all of that, I think we can take a good amount of solace in the fact that I think that Orange County Sanitation District has really thought through how long they think they might need with that February 6th date. Any other thoughts on that?
One more second.
Yes.
It says in the findings and decision on page 6, proposed ordinance, line number 25A. Petition is granted a short variance from the district rule, et cetera,
Mhm.
starting December 6, 2020,
Mhm.
and ending upon completion of the testing
Mhm.
and the no, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, they don't give you a final date of in order of
Yes.
February 6th. They give you upon the completion.
Did you read the end of that? So look at line 28. The last word is but. Do you see that? On the page, the last word on the page is but.
But below,
No, it says comma, yeah, below comma, but. And then on the next page, it says in no event later than February 6, 2021. So it does give an end date. It's an alternative end date because we don't want it to end February 6, 2021 if they don't need it. So it's an alternative end date, essentially, whichever comes
yeah,
first.
based on the short variance, they give it the short variance in February 6th.
That would be the end date if they have not completed the testing. So they have up until then to complete the testing. If they complete the testing before February 6th, they just simply give notification in accordance with condition 5.
Correct.
And once they do that, then the variance ends. If they haven't, the variance will end by February 6th.
And they come back for, if it's not in by February 6th, then they have to come back. This is very sensitive.
That's their choice. And all we are tasked with today is looking at the evidence before us and seeing whether we can make all the findings and whether we feel that the term that has been specified is backed by the evidence. And I think it is, based upon all the evidence we see in the declarations as to everything that has transpired, their experience already with what's happened, where they are in the process, the fact that they do anticipate some issues to come up, but that they are very far along in the process, and they have calculated that they do not foresee that they'll go beyond February 6th. And that's what we're deciding today. And if that doesn't happen, they lose variance relief and they have to come before us and explain why they would need additional variance relief or other variance relief, because if they request a regular variance, then they would need to explain why that is. And we need to
They
make the
tell you
finding.
in advance that this is a very sensitive piece of equipment, and in doing troubleshooting the equipment, the minor problem caused a setback. So let's hope they finish February 6th. If you don't, then you can see it again. They're telling you that in advance.
Okay, so Senator, I'd like to know, what is your proposal? Is your proposal that we don't grant the variance because it's going to take too
Oh,
long?
no.
Do you think that the party should have asked for longer? Because
They may have, they should put short and regular in case. Short is not enough.
I understand your hesitancy, given other matters that we hear. However, in this case, I believe that the evidence shows that it's very likely, more likely than not, that they'll finish by February 6th. If that weren't the case, then they needed to ask for other relief and justify to this board why a variance should be given for longer, because this board is hesitant to grant longer relief unless it's justified. In this matter, I don't believe longer relief is justified. Things happen, it could be, but I don't think they're telling us in this case that they're going to go beyond February 6th, and they think that at this point. I think from everything I read.
I think they will, but that's okay.
Okay.
Based
Then
on
you should vote no, but I would want to know
no,
why.
I just think they're going to slip the date. That's all.
Okay. Okay, I don't see anything in the papers to support that they believe that, but I know it happens in other cases, but I mean, that doesn't mean it happens in every case.
It does.
Sorry? It does happen in every case?
Fun.
Okay. We take every case on a case-by-case basis, and things happen. However, at this point, it's my belief, and other board members feel differently, may say so. It's my belief that the Orange County Sanitation District believes, based upon all the evidence we see, that February 6th is the latest date that they will be in compliance. And that's why they've requested this variance as a short variance, and that's why they could have had 90 days. They could have said, let me have till March 6th, but they didn't request that. or whatever 90 days is. I don't know if it's March 6th or March 7th, or I didn't count it out. Any other thoughts, though? Yes, Ms. Verdugo-Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe that they are acting in good faith. They are a public agency. They know they serve the public, and I think they're trying to do their best. They've had an extraordinary challenge here, and it hasn't been an easy one for them to take apart that piece of equipment and send it to another state and wait for it to come back and do all the things that they have been doing to try to get this thing going and come into compliance and have it operate. So I truly do believe that they're doing the best that they can under the circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that the question is whether or not they believe now, today, that they're going to need to come back and have more time. And I think the answer is no. Mr. Balagopalan.
Well, I was just going to add, hopefully the major mistakes are behind them. You know, the counterweights were, the holes were drilled incorrect place on the crankshaft for the counterweights. And then subsequently, I think the material they used in the piston overheated and caused that explosion, you know, the bushing. I don't know if the piston bushing or not, but hopefully those are all behind them. And if anything, they may experience as they start up other problems, but hopefully not as catastrophic or a big failure that they cannot overcome and finish the testing by the February date.
And I guess the good news also is this was a bottom to top operation. Is that right? And I think that all the latest problems they have are on the top. So it's just really the top that had to be fixed and ready to go. So hopefully that shows that the majority of the engine is in good already.
I'd seen one before in Kentucky actually, and the engine was taken apart. So they have to, you know, do the piston rings, new rings. They have to hone the cylinder block, and so there's a lot of to recondition the whole engine. So there's a lot of work involved, a lot of, and of course hundreds and thousands. I don't know how many pieces that are, you know, that all have to fit together. And hopefully there's no piece left lying around after they're done the assembly.
like when my husband puts together a piece of furniture.
And I've done that too with the typewriter. So.
Never following the directions.
let's just assume that based on how complicated these are, there's no pieces of equipment hanging around.
I can go ahead and make the motion if you choose.
Go ahead, Mr. Balagopalan.
Okay, in the matter of Orange County Sanitation District case number 2048-15, I move that we grant a short variance commencing December 6, 2020 and continuing through February 6, 2021 from the following rules and Rule 3002C1, 203B, and permit G. I may add there's an R before the G. The R is for reissue. Some places they've added the R, some places they haven't, but there's an R and then G for 45189.
Important clarification for the minute order.
Condition number 16.N. And for the equipment located at 10844 Ellis Avenue in Fountain Valley, and that I move that we adopt the conditions as listed in exhibit number 7 as without any changes, except adding the R wherever it's relevant before the permit number.
And there are no excess emissions?
Yes, and there are no excess emissions during this.
I'm going to second the motion. However, I want to ask that we make a few changes. First of all, I would ask Mr. Balagopalan that your motion include the entire Exhibit 7, incorporation of both the findings, the decision, and the entire order and the conditions.
Yes, no objection.
Okay, and then the term, just to clarify, is not straight out beginning December 6th and ending February 6th, 2021, but rather the term is as stated on pages 6 through 7 of Exhibit 7, paragraph A. So that just more specifically or more complete, it's upon the ending of the testing and the notice thereof that is required, but in no event later than February 6th. Is that correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Thank you for a thorough motion. Senator, how do you vote? How do you vote, Senator?
I vote aye.
Great. Ms. Verdugo Peralta, how do you?
Aye, Mr. Dr. Bernstein.
Dr. Bernstein has recused himself.
I know, but aye for him anyway.
Oh, an aye for him. We won't put that on the record, though. Ms.
I
Verdugo.
also vote aye.
I vote yes. Mr. Balagopalan, you vote?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 with Dr. Bernstein not voting or participating due to a recusal. Great. And again, just to point to any parties that are watching, these were very thorough papers, and we appreciate that. And we appreciate how much work and evidence and thought went into these papers. I would request in the future for any other parties that are watching, and in addition to the parties that are part of this hearing and are watching, that in the future, please make sure to have your consent papers complete to the best of your ability. And if they need to be amended, hold all amendments until it's all complete and present full and final documents all at the same time to the board, so there is no confusion as to many different versions out there. And to please do so by the deadline for consent papers so that we can have hearings on consent. This matter clearly should have been on consent. I'm glad it was heard on consent, and I don't want to have to pull matters for consent just because of not enough time for the parties to have the papers 100% right and the board to rely on those papers. Any other business, board members, before we adjourn? Well, thank you very much. Oh, and Dr. Bernstein, but first of all, thank you very much, board members, for a very good discussion. Dr. Bernstein.
Yes, thank you. That was thoroughly enjoyable. I wanted to just ask regarding tomorrow's hearing.
We have a hearing tomorrow, right, on OC waste and recycling.
We do.
Idea how long that might take?
I do not.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Mr.
I couldn't
Balagopalan.
hear what you were saying. I'm sorry.
I was just asking if anybody had a guesstimate about how long that hearing will take.
I don't. It's very difficult before we hear a matter to estimate how long it might take, because you may recall we had a modification hearing last week. And if I were asked in advance, I would have said for sure by mid-afternoon, but that did not happen.
You previously scheduled training for the afternoon of that day also tomorrow.
No, we're not having training.
I know you moved it off calendar, but it was previously scheduled. So that meant you would have a short morning.
Well, that was always the hope. I mean, but training could be pushed off.
I understand. But the implication is that by putting the training session there, suggests that the hearing in the morning would satisfy that item.
I just thought I might ask everybody's opinion. It's okay.
It is always the hope that if we have only one hearing, that it would be concluded by the morning, unless it's like an emergency or an interim, which generally does take much longer because it's a two-part hearing. But the training was scheduled because there's a need to get our alternates up and running. But we had to change it.
When I came on the board, we didn't have that much training. I'm
What's
still
that?
learning.
Yeah, well, when I came on the board, we had zero training. Zero. It was watch it and that's it. The training has definitely improved over time as we have seen that we can do that, and that there's a definite need for continuous training. So did you have more, something else to add, Mr. Balagopalan?
Oh, yeah, I did work on the flow chart for the rule 303, and I'll send it to you and Faye as a draft, to look at first before we share it with the other board members.
That sounds great. That's really helpful for people who can follow flow charts. I'm visually impaired.
In regards to the hearing tomorrow, I believe that the clerk forwarded an amended petition to the board today, this morning,
Okay.
as well as the minute order associated with this matter.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So let's all look out for those additional papers today so that we can be prepared for tomorrow.
Finish the papers.
Additional, there's an amended petition as well as the minute order related to this matter tomorrow.
When was that
Will
posted
do.
on internet? When was that posted on the internet? Request for additional papers.
When were the,
Those are pending?
Oh, I don't know.
They have been forwarded to you, to the board. This
They
morning,
have been forwarded.
to the board,
Yeah.
yeah.
We got the minute order.
I got the minute order.
Oh,
When
okay,
was it
the
forwarded to the
petition's
board?
probably on its, should be coming to you guys shortly.
okay. So we
Okay.
received the minute
When
order.
was that forwarded to the board?
Sorry,
Additional papers request. When is that being reported to the board? Or has it been sent already?
can you say that again? Because you're shuffling papers. I couldn't hear.
When was the additional papers sent to the board for their notification?
Well, the minute order is our order. So you've received the final minute order in this matter thus far. So that's related.
That's all.
That's ours that we created. And the amended petition, when did that come in?
That came in, I believe, yesterday, and it should be getting forwarded to you, to the board sometime this morning.
My question
All right,
is gonna-
Okay, but it hasn't yet, correct?
Hold on.
Because I don't have anything in my inbox.
You'll recall, board members, that this, let me just look at this real quick.
Yeah, the most recent thing I have is for OC Waste and Recycling this morning at 7:41. And other than the expense claim request at 8:29, I don't have anything else.
She hasn't forwarded yet, but she will be shortly.
Okay.
Okay,
So just, I don't want to get into the substance, but board members, you'll recall this matter was related. It is not the same matter that we heard with regard to the fire at this facility. The fire for this facility occurred after we first heard this matter that we're hearing tomorrow. So any amended petition will update the board as to how the fire that occurred after affects this matter, which was for pieces of equipment at the same facility that have now been somehow, we don't know yet, we're going to talk about it tomorrow, affected by that fire. So that's why we're receiving an amended petition to update us on that. And we'll have that hearing tomorrow, but the hearing was already scheduled by the board. at the last hearing. So it was a hearing we were supposed to already have, because the last one was an interim. This is going to be for short variance, is that correct? Short variance relief, or is it for regular? Maybe well, I don't know. We're gonna see. Perhaps they are requesting something completely different. Let's find out.
It's still short.
Still short, okay. So the minute order you received was from that interim variance, that order for the interim variance. Okay, so you know what you're getting. Now we'll wait for it for later today, and we will have the hearing tomorrow. Any other business before we adjourn for today? All right, thank you, board members, and we will see everyone tomorrow. Thank you, Paul. I see you jumping on. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Have a
Thanks,
good day,
everybody.
everybody.
We are adjourned.
Have a great day. See everybody tomorrow.
Have a great day. See you tomorrow.
Mañana.